Hey everyone, Nathan Rose here, coming to you from Graz in Austria, where I'm playing in a classical over-the-board chess tournament. I've got my Brezel, I've got my Apfelschorle, and we're going to be reviewing my round 7 game today with some really instructive lessons in the end game. Now, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please do hit the subscribe button. I do a lot of different content around chess, including game reviews, but also looking at my favourite software and other chess-related tools, tips on how to improve, and lots more. So let's get into it. I've got the white pieces, and one thing that's been happening a lot at this tournament for me is that after my games are over, my opponents have been telling me that they have found my YouTube channel. Now, on the one hand, this is quite gratifying to hear that I've got some new fans, but on the other hand, it's reminding me that I'm actually quite easy to find. So they look at my YouTube channel, they find my chess.com account, they know what opening I'm likely to play. So given this knowledge, given that I expected that my opponent would have been spending all day researching me, preparing for my normal opening with white, I decided to mix things up a little bit, and instead of playing my usual e4, I played d4. So let's see if this proves to be a surprise for my opponent. We get a Queen's Gambit. Queen's Gambit declined, and this exchange is what I've played a little bit, so I'm not completely new to this, but it is something that I don't play very much. My goal really is just to get an opening position where I'm not going to be out-prepared by my opponent. We get bishop e7, e3, and bishop f5 is actually an inaccuracy from my opponent. I didn't recognize this move from when I used to play the Queen's Gambit about a year ago. And when you don't recognize a move, it can be because you don't remember it, or it can be because your opponent has made a wrong move. It turns out that the way to punish this is to capture the knight on f6, so giving up the bishop pair. Then after black takes back, then you play queen b3, forking the d5 and b7 pawns. Black can't save both of them. What I played instead was queen b3 immediately with the same idea, but black now plays knight b to d7 and the opportunity is gone. I can't really take this pawn because then after rook to b8, the queen moves and you just lose the pawn back, and this rook is very active, so black is much better here. And if you try taking this pawn, then that's even worse. Black takes the knight, and if you take the bishop, then the knight takes back, and black has got 3 pieces against 2 white pieces. And if you take this knight, hoping that black's going to take the bishop and then you win that bishop, black instead gives this check first and then takes the bishop. And now the f5 bishop is defended by the queen. Again, black has 3 pieces against 2. So after knight b to d7, I just reminded myself of my approach to this game. I was just looking for a normal opening position, so I went ahead with natural development. Knight f3, bishop e2. It's not ideal. You'd probably prefer that the bishop was on this d3 square, but that's controlled by the black bishop. And we both castle. So all I've done here is develop my pieces to normal squares. Certainly white has no advantage out of this opening, but white is not worse either. Black keeps that d5 pawn secure with the c6 move, and then I jump in with the knight to e5. Just trying to improve my position step by step. We develop some pieces to even better squares. This rook on the c file and this rook on the e file are both on semi-open files, and now black wants to trade this strong knight off. We trade the bishops first, and then I play bishop to d3. Normally this light squared bishop is white's good bishop and you don't want to trade it, but in this particular case the black light squared bishop is controlling a lot of squares, and I feel like my position is improved by this trade. So now obviously if black takes the knight, then I take the bishop. So instead, black retreats his bishop back to h7, which I thought was fairly brave. I just take it. Now the king is a little bit exposed. I can give this check on c2 if I'd like to. And you know, the queen actually is misplaced on b3, so this was definitely an idea I had. I moved the knight back to avoid the trade, which was on offer, because I thought that these two knights were going to get in each other's way. The knight on b6 for black is misplaced. So black plays f5. This is starting some potential play on the king side. It's quite well known in the structure where white has this pawn chain against this pawn chain from black, that black should be looking to play on the king side while white should be looking to play on the queen side. And a little tip, you can often tell this, even if you don't have it memorized, by looking at the direction of your pawns. So these pawns are pointing towards the queen side, which provides a clue quite often that you should be playing on the queen side if you're white, and the opposite for black, pointing towards the king side. So I do win this tempo. Remember, I thought that the queen was misplaced on b3, so by threatening the pawn I win a tempo. Black defends, and now I play b3. I'm also realizing that this black knight on b6 is misplaced, and black would like to play the maneuver knight c4, knight d6, knight e4. So by playing b3, black has to go another way. He has to go via c8, coming to the same square, but just doing it in a more backwards way, which I thought was good for me. And now I played b4, starting my play on the queen side. Now this pawn can't be taken by the queen. Well, it can, but that would be advantageous for me, because then you get to play rook b1, and then when the queen moves back, then you get the rook to b7. Kind of the opposite of what I showed earlier, right, where it was going to be queen takes b7. Often the b2 pawn and b7 pawn can't be taken by the queen because of a rook to the b file follow-up. So my opponent realized that, of course, and didn't take the offered pawn, and instead continued with his knight maneuver. Now I played a4, and this is a common middle game strategy that white employs called the minority attack. What I'm trying to do here is to break up this pawn chain that black's got. If I could play b5, let's just give myself an extra move. Let's say I get another move here and black takes. Then my idea is not to take back, but actually to take here on d5. That's winning a tempo against the queen, and I've got this open file. You could even consider bringing the knight to c7 after the black queen moves. On the other hand, if I was given another move, let's say black allows me to capture on c6, then this pawn is weak and can become a target later. So that's the idea behind a4, to play b5. So black now wants to trade off this knight, knowing that the knight, if it's allowed to capture on d5, is going to be a nuisance, so he wants to make this trade. I play b5, we get the trade, and now black plays the rook to c8. But now I've actually got an opportunity to gain an advantage here, because by playing the rook over to c8, he's left a couple of weaknesses in his position. Namely, the a7 pawn is going to be weak after I play queen a5. That pawn is not easy to defend. He could move the rook back, I suppose, but then I get to capture and capture. So that has won a pawn for me. And this pawn is also quite weak right now. So yeah, queen a5 is a move that my opponent must have missed. He takes on b5, and here I should have taken a bit more time. I simply captured back on b5 with the queen, attacking these two pawns. But a better way to go about things would have been to take on a7. let's say that black takes on a4, then I can actually take on c8 and then win the pawn back this way. Black's rook is under attack, and so is the pawn on d5. So once black defends the rook with queen d8, let's say, then I can take the pawn. So in this case, I've got 5 pawns against 4 black pawns. Black does still have some compensation, I think. This rook has got the c-file while my rook is yet to develop, and this outside pawn does look a bit scary, but turns out that the material is the thing that gives white an advantage. But okay, after queen takes b5 instead, this still looks quite good for me. I'm attacking b7 and d5, but black plays knight f6. Now the knight defends d5 and the queen defends b7. I play rook b1, which is not the right idea, because now black can take over control of the c-file. He's preparing to double rooks, so I've got to at least trade off one of those rooks before that happens. And now I bring the knight into e5. This wasn't really possible before when the knight was on d7, but now that the black knight has moved over to f6, the e5 square is again available for my knight. We get a few more moves. This is just to defend against any possible back rank mating ideas, giving my king an escape square. And what's happening now is that black is looking for an endgame, to trade all the pieces, and that's why he brought his king a little bit closer. According to the computer, I shouldn't go for this endgame. I'm better off with pieces left on the board, but I felt that the position after trading everything and bringing the rook to b5 looked very good for me. This rook is tied down to passive defense, while this rook has got all the threats. So this looks better for me. Black brings the king a little closer, and I do the same. And now I grab control of the open c-file. I wanted to do this now because if I gave black another move, then he plays king to d6, and now rook to c5 is met by rook c7. And now white can't allow the rook trade because the resulting pawn endgame is winning for black. Let's just show a couple more moves. That pawn's going to be lost and black will win. So what we get instead after king d6 is I play rook c8. This is a good plan, coming in behind black's position, and black goes passive to defend with rook to g6. I bring the king closer. Now he plays b6. And this is a difficult decision. So if I trade, then this is a outside passed pawn, and I've got to be, again, worried about the rook trade. So what I did instead was I played a6. And I know from experience that this wing pawn advanced on the edge of the board can provide some tactical opportunities. So black plays king to d7, and now I play a mistake. I play rook to h8. What I should have played instead was react in a way consistent with playing this pawn to a6 a move ago. I should have instead played rook to b8. Now this creates a threat of a skewer on the black king and rook. I don't expect that black's going to miss that, but what it does prevent is black from coming to b5 tactically, because then you can play rook to b7. The rook is attacked, so is this pawn. If the rook captures, then that pawn is going to become a queen. And if the rook moves out of the way, then you win this pawn, and white is winning. So tactical opportunities, they can still happen in the endgame. Got to stay aware of them. What I was thinking when I played rook to h8 was actually along similar lines, that I was going to play rook to b8, but I wanted to provoke the h-pawn to advance first. What I failed to consider was that black would ignore that threat and just play king to c6 directly. The reason I wanted to provoke this pawn forward was I thought it would provide my king a way in to target these pawns, sort of weakening black's pawn structure to allow my king in. but you've always got to remember that one reaction that your opponent can have to a threat is to ignore the threat. So that's what black did. Black played king to c6. So now he's going to get to b5 successfully and win this pawn. I've really got to take that one, otherwise I've got no compensation at all. So black comes around, and even though we're equal in material, now black's got two connected passed pawns, and this endgame is going to be very difficult for me. And that's even true after I win another pawn, with check even. So now I've got 5 pawns against black's 4 pawns, but these 2 pawns provide black with all the winning chances. So black wastes no time in moving his pawns forward. I'm trying to do the same. I've got to generate counterplay. Trying to go passive defending these pawns is not going to work. I've got to create my own chances of promoting a pawn of my own. Now black plays king to b3, which is a great practical move, because if we just show what happens if black doesn't move off the c-file, one potential idea that I've always got is to give this check, and then once the king moves away, to promote the pawn this way. So by getting off the c-file, there's no longer that check from behind by my rook. I'm bringing the king closer. Now king to d4, again, the idea is okay. I'm trying to bring the king in to get this black rook to move away, but these endgames are very concrete. You have to see ahead not just a couple of moves, like you might be able to get away with in the middle game, but to accurately calculate a pawn race, you might need to see ahead 10 moves. What I've got to play instead is either e4, which is very difficult to see. The idea is that you're threatening to create a connected passed pawn of your own, and then if you take, then the king is a little bit better placed on e4, because when black's pawn eventually promotes, you're not on a square where it can provide check. Very difficult to see that. Like on d4, when the black pawn becomes a queen, that'll be a check. This becomes important later. The other idea is you can play rook c8 and give checks to the black king. I kind of saw this, but again, it's hard to convince yourself that this is the right way forward. You need to calculate very deeply in order to figure out that this works. What I played instead was king d4 with the idea of coming around to attack this rook, but then black plays rook a7 and I am lost now. I have to say my opponent played this endgame very well. I play rook to b6, and again, my opponent just gives up the pawn. So now I'm 2 pawns ahead, but the quality of this a pawn with a rook behind it and the king close is decisive. King to c2. Obviously, I can't attack this pawn in any good way, so I give a check. So now rook to b6, with the idea that if black pushes the pawn, then I can give this check and give up my rook for the pawn and hope that I can promote my own pawn, or at least get black to give up his own rook for it. But black doesn't allow even that plan. Instead, black moves back with the king to c2. Okay, so another check. Maybe I can get a draw by repetition if we just repeat the same moves. But now black plays the study-like king to d1. So now I still don't have access to c2 or, more importantly, c1 to stop the pawn from promoting. And I also don't have that plan of moving back to b2, because with the king not on d2 anymore, then I can't give a check on b2. Very good play by my opponent, have to say so. So after king to d1, I spent all of my remaining time looking for a way out, but when there's no way out, you could spend all the time in the world. There's no solution to all the problems that I've got here. Rook to c7, very optimistic. Yeah, no, my opponent's not going to allow this. Of course not. So he just moves instead back to a8. And now I don't have anything better than to try pushing my pawn, but black's pawn queens first with check. Remember I said before, the fact that the king's on d4 is actually important. If this wasn't a check, then I'd have time to promote my own pawn. So I'm just one tempo short, but one tempo short makes all the difference. I played a few more moves, but pretty soon black was able to force resignation, and I took a loss, a very instructive loss, I think, in the endgame. So to finish off, let's go over the key learning moments from this game. First of all, I have to say that starting with 1d4 went completely fine for me. I got a playable position out of the opening just by playing normal developing moves. I mean, okay, I haven't got any advantage with white here, but it just goes to show you don't need to memorize a whole lot in order to get a playable position, because the game was really decided later on. The next key moment was here, where I came up with the right plan, which is to go for the minority attack with b4, a4, and then b5. Often the real key to playing an opening well is to know the middle game ideas. So not the move by move memorization, but knowing that this is the thing that I need to do was key to getting a nice position where I actually had a good advantage. Because then after queen a5, my opponent was in real trouble. And actually, if you look at the computer evaluation, I had a close to winning advantage here. My real problem came quite a bit later when I was threatened by the king. After king d7 hitting the rook, I went with rook to h8, which failed to consider that my opponent might ignore this threat, which is what he did. He went king to c6, king to b5, won this pawn on a6, and then after this, the game was very difficult for me with these two connected passed pawns. That's probably the thing that I'll remember most from this game, was just that, yeah, if your opponent is threatened by something, they don't have to respond to it. They can choose to ignore it. So I ended up losing a winning game, or certainly a game which I could have drawn. But you know what? This was a stronger opponent, and I definitely matched it with him. And they say that you should thank your opponents when they beat you, because they give you a lesson free. So I hope you enjoyed that video. Hope you found it instructional. I'm happy to share my losses because we can all learn from them. I'm a student of the game too. So do subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this one. Leave a like if you found it valuable, and drop a comment below about what you thought of the game. One more time then, I'm Nathan Rose. Hope you enjoyed watching. Auf Wiedersehen.